Hello, good people of the internet. Welcome to The Unlearning Playground, an everyday life podcast by Chetan Narang. So, today is Saturday, the 10th of September. It's been more than a week now that I've been back from my vacation from Bali, Indonesia. And I've been looking for a topic to just get back on the mic and record an episode for this podcast. And today morning, I was scrolling randomly through Instagram, which told me that today is actually the 10th of September. It is the International Suicide Prevention Day. We have days for everything now, right? Personally, I'm not too big on such days, but I think the general theme is to raise an awareness about a particular topic on a particular day. So to that effect, I don't really mind it anyway too. So I decided to turn on the mic today and record an episode talking about this very thing, suicide prevention. Now, how I wanted to approach this topic is something that I've wanted to talk about previously also on this podcast. Um, you see, there are so many things we are taught in our school days. There are just numerous subjects that we go through and all of that jazz. But something that I personally feel is explicitly missing from our education is the fact that life goes about in the form of a sine wave. You know, there are ups and there are downs. There are crests and there are troughs. And any adult who's listening to me right now, I think would definitely agree with what I'm saying. Adult, of course, in terms of number of years spent on this planet. Anyone who has had enough experience would say that yes, this is true. Change is kind of the only constant. Things go up, things go down, life goes up, life goes down, and all of that. It happens to everyone. But this is something that we learn on the go. It's not something that is explicitly taught to us when we are kids. And we need to understand that. I think it's something that kids would benefit from if they are explicitly taught that. Because if we do not realize this, we're kind of missing out on almost something akin to a law of nature, right? This is something that happens in our day-to-day lives. This is something that happens in things that matter to us. I mean, I remember when I was reading this book, Thinking Fast and Slow, this guy was talking about a phenomena called regression to the mean. And I believe I'm going to do an episode specifically dedicated to that phenomena because it's a fascinating topic. But one thing that he talked about while talking about regression to the mean was purely in layman terms, everything that goes on a high is supposed to regress back to its mean. For example, a player of any sport who has performed like an MVP, like a most valuable player in a particular season, almost invariably falls down from that level to that player's basic mean performance level, right? I'm big on cricket because from India. So if you remember Virat Kohli from 2016, I don't think even he can manage what he achieved in that year, right? And similarly, this would have happened even with Sachin when I was a young kid, or with players in sports that you have watched yourself. This is almost a law of nature, like I called it. Now, why I'm talking about all of that is because I feel that there is too much focus on happiness these days. I don't know if it's just these days or if that's always been the case, but too many people want to, too early in their lives, want to solve for happiness, want to optimize for happiness in their lives. And I think that's kind of a naive way to build a life because you see, it simply isn't as practical as it might seem on the outset, right? Because if you're talking to someone, you can very well say that, yeah, I want to be happy in my life. Everyone wants to be happy in their life. But there are always going to be downward phases following those phases of happiness and other highs, right? They simply have to be. So you have to prepare yourself for that too. I mean, what are you going to do when you are in that downward spiral? Are you going to blame your partner, your job, your career, or whatever else you're up to? I think you get the flow. there has to be a downward phase. There simply has to be. If there wouldn't be, the high wouldn't feel that high anymore, right? And I think that would depress us anyway. So in today's episode, I wanted to talk about the lows of the sine curve of life and some do's and don'ts of this phase that, you see, if anyone is going through those low phases of life, it can last up to years for some people, and it can last only up to a few hours for those lucky people and in those lucky situations. But you see, whenever the lowest of the lows hit us, it's easy to get caught up in the moment and feel desperate and fall into a downward spiral, really. And I think any sort of help that is needed at these moments is, of course, supposed to be tailored to the individual situation at hand. But a few general know hows can always help out, right? So here goes. The first thing I want to talk about is labels. I was very recently watching an interview of Sourav Ganguly where someone asked him what advice would you give to young cricketers who are going through the traumas that you faced when you were a cricketer. And Sourav Ganguly, being Sourav Ganguly, he replied back saying, I did not really go through any trauma. I only had high pressure, low pressure, medium pressure, or very high pressure days. I did not go through any trauma. And I think that is an advice that I would give to any young cricketer too. Don't really label your pressure situations as traumas, because that can get to you. Deal with them as they come, and then go on with your life. That's how life goes. And that is how most people's situations are too, right? I mean, I really love this answer from Sourav Ganguly. If you think about it, see, I'm not discounting that there are people who are actually clinically depressed and actually need antidepressants too to even get their most basic chores done. But let's be honest, that's not really the case with most of us. So, unnecessarily labeling our situations with fancy terms such as even terms that are very easily coined these days, depression, anxiety, and going up to even clinical depression, those terms don't really serve the purpose that we think they might. And the funny thing about labels is that it can also work the other way around. For example, Virat Kohli in his recent interview was talking about how it's kind of a taboo to even accept or say out in the public that, yeah, I'm feeling down, I'm feeling low, right? Because you might be labeled weak, you might be labeled as someone who can't really cope up with the pressure and all of that jazz. So in that sense, yeah, of course, you might consider yourself too much of a stoic, of course, the misunderstanding one, or even someone who's very strong, who doesn't even consider that there could be something wrong with the situation he's in. So it's a double-edged sword, really. What I really advise people who meet up with me and want my advice about how to go about their lives in these low phases is really that don't focus too much on the labels. Don't really go out of your way to say that, yeah, I'm a clinically depressed person, even though you might not be, right? And don't even go out of your way to say that, yeah, nothing's wrong with me, because there of course could be. Now, the next one in the list of do's in the low phases of your life is one that I personally hold very close to my heart. And that is a very simple advice. Just take a break. Take a break from your life situation. And I personally feel that that is one of the first things that anyone who's going through a phase where it's almost a desperate cry for help, that just let me know what I can do. If you are in that kind of a situation, the first thing you should be doing is really taking a break. Again, I'm too big on cricket right now, but I heard Virat Kohli's very candid interview very recently. So he had taken a break from professional cricket. He was out of form for what, 2-3 years now. He took a break for almost 30 odd days, came back, and the break of course helped him get back into form. We saw that. But in the very first candid interview that he did after his break, he said that the break helped him much more than just getting him back into form. One of the major things that he realized was that he says, I realized that I'm much more than the cricket I'm playing. I mean, of course, people want to look up to me as a cricketer and a professional sports person, But I realized that I'm much more than the game I'm playing. I'm a human being at heart. And isn't that just such a powerful realization? And I'll go out on a limb and say that this realization is missing from a lot of people in the busy lives that we lead these days. We are so caught up in our jobs, we are so caught up in the things we are doing, and the way in which we are doing our things, that we forget that there are things that we might have to reevaluate. We might really need to unlearn, or even things that we could be taking for granted, which we really should be more grateful about. And for all of these things, just taking a step back sometimes, just taking a break from your regular day to day rigmarole always helps. And a metaphor that I use to communicate this to my clients is always that speed breakers are good, at least some of them. You know, if you're on a vacation and let's say you're driving your vehicle very close to a beach and there's this beautiful scenery all over the place, and you're just going at a regular speed, enjoying the view and all of that, but somehow a speed breaker comes up on the road. Now, that speed bump can really be an annoying thing, but what can also happen is that because you had to slow down even from the constant speed you were at, because you had to slow down, you were able to see just a little bit more of what was really going on and what you were missing out on, right? So in that sense, speed breakers are good. And that is another advice that anyone who's going through a low phase can really just incorporate very easily. Just take a break, take a step back, and reevaluate. Think over things. Maybe it helps. Now, on to the third and the last piece of advice that I would want to give on this topic. This one is something of, I think it's something that I've talked about in my podcast previously, but not specifically to this topic. It's about perspective. And perspective is something, I don't know, I've talked about it almost in every single episode that I do on this podcast. You see, when I say that life goes about in the form of a sine curve, there are highs and there are lows. And if you're at let's say you're at the lowest of lows, and the lowest of lows, of course, would be that you're getting suicidal thoughts and you just want to end it. You feel that you just can't take it anymore, right? The metaphor that I use for these thoughts is something akin to, whenever I'm at a beach and I look at the vast expanse of ocean right in front of me, I suddenly feel this burden. What would it feel like to be at the bed of this ocean? There would be so much weight, right? So much weight over you. And that is a metaphor for the burden that a person feels when they're feeling suicidal. There's just too much pressure, there's just too much burden, and you just can't take it anymore. Now, the change in perspective that I want to bring about here is that, you see, feeling helpless is quite common. And at your lowest points, you might consider that you're completely buried. But believe me, it's only a small shift in perspective to see that you might actually have just been planted. Look at it. There's nowhere but upwards from here. And I know that the moment I say that to anyone, people who kind of overthink even here would definitely want to ask me, what if it gets worse, right? How can you really guarantee that nothing can get worse from here? And that's not really a naive question to ask. But you see, here's the catch. If you're already buried under the ocean, what more can a damn mug of water, or a bucket of water, or even a tub of water, or even a damn river full of water do to you now, right? So, metaphorically, it's not gonna get worse. You are already at your rock bottom. If you're contemplating suicide, if you're already contemplating ending it all, it's not gonna get any worse from here. So, I think it's just a matter of changing your perspective like this, where you start to see that instead of feeling buried, you feel that you've just been planted. It's not gonna get any worse from here. Might as well see where upwards it can go, right? You see, the optimist in me wants to tell you that there is light at the end of the tunnel. But the realist in me also wants to caution you that there might not be a light at the end of this tunnel. We might have to take a few steps back and navigate the roads again. But to find out either of them, you have to keep going through the darkness first, right? I mean, you never know what worse luck your bad luck has shielded you from. I think this was a dialogue from that movie. What was the name of that movie? I completely forget that now. I'm going to get it by the end of this episode. Yeah. So I think this is also one advice that I generally give to everyone who wants to talk to me and work with me, because perspective is something that dictates how you go about your life. And sometimes it's just a small matter of changing your perspective which can rearrange your whole life for you. No Country for Old Men. That was the name of the movie. So with this, we also come to the end of this episode. Having said all that I said, I'm pretty sure I didn't cover all the advices I myself would have to offer to my clients or my friends or close ones. But yeah, this was more or less a general framework. And like I said previously, anyone going through a low phase and seeking out real help must be helped in a way tailored to their own specific situation, And that is what I do in my life coaching practice too. If you or any of your close ones are in need of such guidance, I know I can help out. Please go on to my website www.chetanarang.org and check out the Work With Me section for all the relevant details on how to get started. Well, okay then. Plugging in a little reminder to ask you to share this episode with your people and subscribe the show on YouTube and podcast platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts to stay connected there. I hope to see you in the next episode too. Until next time, peace out.